News going live in 3, 2. All right, what is going on, guys? It's Adam aka Marf, and this is Marfoogle News. We've got really crazy news today, and again, a lot of channels say that every single day that this is a good show and stuff, but this is massive. This is there's confirmation of things that we've been saying for a long time. There's confirmation of things that the community has let us, heads up on for a very long time. So we're going to talk about that, including they have found communication devices inside of power supplies. So yeah, this is something that you need to pay attention to. First off, Germany supposedly foils alleged Russian plot to mail incendiary devices. Now, if you're in this community, you're probably questioning absolutely everything, including all of this DHL stuff. Now, there's a couple ways to look at this as far as, if you've followed all of the DHL stuff, we've actually covered all of the DHL plane stuff with the stories with Russia. And those can actually be found on our website if you search DHL on marfooglenews.com. And you can go back to those archived news pieces and find when this all kind of started, when the Polish prime minister suggested that Russia was actually going to essentially use planes as some sort of weapon, right? So, but now we have this breaking news, right? That German police detained 3 men suspecting of planning to mail packages laden with boom booms in a Russian-sponsored act of sabotage, reminiscent of recent attacks on DHL logistic hubs. The arrest could shed light on last year's explosions at DHL hubs in Germany and the UK, which Western security officials alleged were part of one of the most audacious plans of sabotage ordered by the Kremlin, and whose target included flights to the US and Canada. Now, again, Polish Prime Minister came out and said that, I believe he was actually first to make this claim. Now, a lot of it in our community, they don't necessarily just believe what they're saying here. There's a lot of ops that go on in war, right? There's of course 3-letter agencies, 6-letter agencies, 4-letter agencies, and 4-letter words being said at all times at this point. But again, this is something that, you don't never know if it's a CIA act to, end up getting something escalated that they needed escalated, but don't have the public opinion for. You never know. But this, I would highly recommend keep your eyes open, because right now, if something like this did happen, so if those 3 men did not get caught, or, supposedly did not get caught doing what they were doing, and they ended up, exploding a plane, it would be a massive escalation. And they're already tying it back to the Kremlin. Did they waterboard the guys? How did they report it so quick? Again, it's something like where you never know what the heck the truth is. Again, we'll find out later, and if you're watching tomorrow, they might go, oh, well, they did this last year or whatever, or they arrested him, they've been watching them, whatever. Again, this is a massive deal. So, again, we're going to talk about the Syrian president here in 2 seconds, but I do want to remind you, there's a lot going on, and especially with the news later tonight on Marfoogle TV, you definitely want to make sure that you're stocked up. I would first get food and water, but if you've got a lot of food and water, or if you definitely work far from home, I would highly recommend getting yourself an EMP shield. As far as this device goes, this is going to protect you against not only an EMP strike from any of our adversaries, but it's also going to protect you against a Carrington-level event from the sun. This is a device that will ground the signal from either an EMP or a solar event in less than 500 trillionths of a second before it's able to fry your device. This isn't just a surge protector. This is a military-grade tool to prevent EMPs. Again, this is actually Keystone military tested. It is the same company that's outfitting agencies like DHS and DOD quietly, and DEMSO team helping protect the Texas grid. You may even see these go up on towers. Again, marfooglenews.com/EMP, and make sure to use the code MARF. That MARF code will not only get you our $50 off discount, but whatever sale they're running. They've extended Liberty sale, so make sure to extend that, and again, out to yourself, and go get it. marfooglenews.com/EMP, and make sure to use the code MARF. All right, let's bring in my co-host/internet brother, Dex James. What is going on, and how are you doing today?
Well, hello, Adam, and hello, Foogle fam. I'm doing just fine.
So our president just met the Syrian president, the new one, right? Let's go over that.
Yeah, so lots of happenings going on in Qatar, which is the second stop in his trip. And one of the things, and we're going to talk about a lot of the rest in our next show, but one of the things was he actually met with the Syrian president, the new guy who had overthrown or took over. So he was urging him to normalize the ties with Israel and brokering peace. So this is sort of, I guess, Trump's MO with the Middle East is how to not make war, but instead bring peace about. So he spent time. They got together. He did not mention a separate offer from Qatar to donate the jet, which has been going on. But he did talk about the fact that he did meet with the president in Syria and that this was right after he lifted those sanctions yesterday. He announced he was lifting sanctions on Syria as a means of helping to, rebuild and better, the relationship between America and Syria.
And yes, this is the same guy that had the magical CNN interview, even though at the current time that he was on the CNN interview, he was still part of the Al Qaeda, $10 million bounty on his head because he was one of America's most wanted. He eventually, it's like funny, they quickly put out articles saying, well, should he even be on the most wanted anymore? The president, we think he should probably take him off. And then, of course, you have a few articles that, again, but this was right before we found out that a lot of these same places that were writing these articles were bought and paid for. I said, oh, yeah, well, there's definitely public pressure for the president to take him off that list. And then I believe he was taken off that list. The CNN had this just crazy, crazy convenient exclusive on this guy that essentially, shouldn't be showing himself in public, let alone being lined up with a CNN crew, had this magical interview that somehow everyone saw. I mean, when there's something like that, you really got to question it. But not only this guy essentially organized his group. His militia was like 5,000, 3,000, 5,000 members. I forget what they're called. But then they also organized all of these other militias. Sounds familiar. It sounds kind of like what happened after 2001 when CIA went to the Middle East with huge suitcases of cash and paid militias to essentially cause trouble and to work for them, right? That way that there's not boots on the ground and they have actual fighters fighting in other countries for our cause, but again, not in the public eye, right? So this guy who just magically started wearing a blazer and turned into a revolutionary is now the president. And now he's meeting with our president. Imagine, that's like a rags to riches story. Much like one that's very familiar in Ukraine, where the guy who played one on TV actually became the real president, right? So like this being said, you got to pay attention to what's happening here, but don't fall into the trap of just accepting what they're saying as factual. Question everything. With this guy, it's also just something to mention that, well, his group was taking over Syria in just 11 days, something that other countries wanted to do for decades. In 11 days, they took it over. Nobody mentions the fact that Israel and the U.S. were also striking. Now, again, this may be a long-term plan for the U.S. Maybe the last administration, that was part of the whole plan, right? But they were striking very strategic parts as these guys were marching along. Sounds like it's all part of one thing. And then now Syria lifts sanctions. Well, that's because Syria is now controlled. I mean, that's just my opinion. But think about it. They lift the sanctions on Syria, and people are saying, "Oh, it's a kind of a gift to Iran." Well, Iran's not in there anymore. Their guys got pushed back. Seems to me like if you control a country, yeah, we're not going to sanction it. We make money off of that. But just my guess. Again, I think it makes sense. I think it makes a lot of sense. But they didn't lift sanctions off of Iran. So, again, that's the main point I want to make. Dex, let's go over rogue communication devices found in Chinese solar power inverters. This is huge. Again, so this is going to be something where you have, of course, I talked about this years ago when, of course, there was a lot of rumors that the reason that the president did an executive order for EMP protection in general is because that there was some sort of communication device found in one of the huge pieces of equipment, power equipment that we had here, regular equipment. Now they're talking about solar devices. Dex,
Yep.
with this is nuts.
Well, so look, this is exactly what we were talking about last week. We were one of the first to bring this together in conjunction with one of the Fugel fam members, no one here yet, when we talked about the Spain power outages, because they, and not just Spain, but Portugal, France, and a bigger chunk of Europe. We had suggested that it was quite possible that this could have been done through the renewable energy, because that's what they were touting 6 weeks earlier. They went fully renewable, and that the solar was attacked because it's been built by China. It was backdoored, and China has interests in influencing Europe for negotiations around trade, especially with all the trade stuff going on with the US. So that's what we talked about. And we said, look, it's going to be solar, it's going to be backdoors. Well, we've said it over and over again since that day. Now they've come out today, and the US energy officials are talking specifically about these solar inverter systems that they're now finding that have additional communication devices in them. So while they may install these inverters, which are connected to the internet, they may put a firewall in front of it so it can't talk back to China. They're finding that inside the devices, if they actually open them up, they have their own modems, their own communications in them that can reach out to cellular networks, reach out to other types of networks, and connect back to China. So it's basically like putting a back door, not just in the software, but in the hardware, and giving it connectivity.
This is something where you have systems in place where people comment, it says, no, that wouldn't work because they put firewalls on it so that no one can communicate with it. Yep, and they thought of that. That's why they put actual hardware in these things so they could physically communicate back to it and then have a second wire or second backdoor into it. So you're talking about this is something we've mentioned a million times. This is why instead of, everybody that said, oh, well, I would rather pay $200 less for a different generator. There's ones on Amazon that I could get today and I could spend $200 less for the same power. But you're getting it from a company that's a straight up shell representation of the CCP. Right? That's why we've recommended Bug Out XP and we've recommended Energy in the past. Again, this is something that you have to think about. You need to get a generator that's front loaded and put together in final assembly in the US with their own software and hardware. Dex, this is a massive thing because over the last 4 years, again, just another thing that like puts this light bulb above everybody's head, or should, that maybe there were people in the last admin that were essentially bought and paid for that all of a sudden have $40 million mansions, and all of a sudden there's a lot of stuff that's in our country that shouldn't be in our country. With this, it's just crazy. Dex, go ahead.
Well, yeah, it is. And the other thing we have to think about is it's not just that they're going to maybe take down a solar farm. A lot of these solar farms are actually interconnected now with the grid. And they can actually have a rippling effect where they can bring down a grid because they can subtract a whole lot of energy, and then the grid is missing that. And of course, the demand just causes the interconnections to crumble because they start to try to pull from one another. And that's exactly what they saw happen in Spain, where they had these multiple locations starting to go down, and that caused a complete grid failure, and everything started to fail across the entire systems. So it is exactly the scenario they're talking about is almost identical to what happened in Spain, and it can happen just about anywhere where we have this type of renewable. And China has a lockhold on this market. They produce the majority of this equipment when it comes to solar. They're the biggest solar manufacturer in there. So yeah, you've got to be careful with the Chinese tech. You absolutely.
And this is the same, the last admin is part of this whole, global move forward towards using exactly this equipment. Look at what just happened in Spain. This is exactly what we were talking about. Everybody that is pushing super hard, like let's all go renewable. I'm all for, doing things that are renewable and recyclable and everything. But as far as that, they had one of their adversaries manufacture the stuff and then didn't think one step ahead. It's not like you can open up a truck-sized piece of equipment and go through every little circuit. So maybe you should just not have the adversary make it. If these things had hardware and actual radio communications and things inside of them, cellular radios in them, then obviously we can't trust them to make aught for us. I mean, like, this is incredible. So there's much more. In fact, we're about to talk about it on our next show. If you want the backup and all the bibliography for today's show, in case anything happens, you can go over to marfooglenews.com, look for this thumbnail, and then, of course, you'll have every single article, tweet, video, picture, document at your fingertips. Now, the next show we're about to do over on Marfoogle TV, if you're in the chat, you'll be ported over, is He Told the Army, Prepare for War. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about the war that is looking like it's about to pop off. Make sure to join us over there. Make sure to be safe. And again, Marf out. Have a good day.
Down.